This is part 2 of a letter that I have written to my third passport. By September of 2023, I took you on another life-changing journey. My friend Mary Pat joined us in keeping a promise made to Pip, who had sadly passed away the previous summer. While he was still alive, he asked me to take his remains home to Africa, where he grew up. We landed in Cape Town, South Africa, on the 1st of September and stayed for 4 days. While we were there, Mary Pat's cell phone was stolen at gunpoint. On the 5th, we flew to Zimbabwe. Then on the 7th, we crossed the border into Zambia, where we would enter the Devil's Pool at Victoria Falls. Afterward, we spent 2 weeks at various safari camps around Zimbabwe and returned to South Africa on the 17th. We were there for 2 more days before flying home. In October, you and I found ourselves back in Rocky Point in Mexico. This third visit was only a 7-day trip. I was there with my sister Lori, her husband Scott, 2 of our cousins, and their husbands. It was a wonderful trip and a chance to reconnect with family who we hadn't seen in far too long. In November, we were back in Peru for our third visit. This time I landed on November 3rd and didn't come back to the States until January 11th. This trip included a non-revenue flight to Miami, a second flight to Lima, Peru, a third flight to Cusco, Peru, and then later a flight from Cusco back to Lima, a flight up to Talara, and then after an hour-long taxi ride, we found ourselves in Mancora, a beach in northern Peru. It was a fantastic trip in which I lost track of days and ended up overstaying my passport. As it turns out, it's only a fine of about $2 per day, and according to the immigration official, they don't keep lists of visitors who stay too long. I remember leaving Peru this time, hoping they'd let me in when I was ready to come for my next visit. In March of 2024, I was back in Scotland. I landed on March 4th and stayed until the 23rd. This included a week's stay in London, since I hadn't been in quite a few years other than the occasional layovers at Heathrow. In April, we traveled back down to Rocky Point. This time it was with my nephew Trey, my niece Brooke, her family, and some of their friends from church. This was a brief visit. We stayed only about a week. By July, I was once again headed back down to Cusco, Peru. I arrived on the 2nd and stayed until the 6th of August. In October, we found ourselves in Cancun, Mexico. This was a trip with my sister Melanie and her husband Pete. We stayed at an all-inclusive resort right on the ocean and even went on a few excursions, including fulfilling my lifelong dream of swimming with dolphins. The day after Christmas, I found myself back in Cusco, Peru, yet again. The more I visit, the more I fall in love with this part of the world. It's one thing to be able to check off a place you've always wanted to visit from your bucket list, and it's an entirely different experience to try to immerse yourself in a culture. This time, I was able to stay until January 24th of 2025. What a fantastic experience. In March of 2025, I found myself in Hartsville, South Carolina. I had driven cross-country with my dad and one of his friends. The only reason I bring this trip up, when my passport wasn't needed, is that right after this, I flew from Charlotte, North Carolina to Las Vegas, where I stayed for a few days. From there, I was off to my 11th visit to Scotland. This time, I flew through Dublin, Ireland, and after about an hour or 2 on the ground, I was back in Edinburgh. I landed on the 9th of March and stayed until the 26th. My dear third passport, I can't even begin to tell you all the places I've visited domestically over the last 10 years or so. This is why, for the most part, I have shared only the international destinations where you were actually required. We have had a blast, needless to say, and if you weren't expiring this soon, my dear friend, I wouldn't have to put you away in this drawer. The bad news is, I no longer get to travel with you. The good news, however, is that your replacement, my 4th passport, has just arrived in the mail. Dear 4th passport, it is so nice to meet you. This is going to be epic.